Well, g'day everyone. It's the Two Ordinary Cops here. We're just putting this in at the beginning as we realised that during the recording, Damo pronounced Keely Bro as really rough. So we just want to clarify, and I do apologise if I've pronounced it wrong, but that's just the way I read it. But yeah, we'd just like to clarify it is Keely Bro. Thank you. Well, g'day everyone. The Two Ordinary Cops are back. And mate, Damo, how are you?
Good, mate. Good. We're doing the best we can today. We've had a few internet dramas down here, and I'm currently at the Ebor pub using a bit of 4G. So we'll see how we go. We'll see what happens.
It's pretty good. It's lucky we're not actually recording video at the moment, mate, because you're frozen and you've got quite a funny look on your face. But the audio seems to be fine. So
well, mate, it's a head for podcasting anyway. So that's all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, mate, we had a couple of topics we're going to talk about today, but as a lot of the listeners would be aware, there's been quite a lot of television coverage of an incident that happened out in Western Queensland, and I know it's consuming our minds. It's quite a touchy subject, but would you like to actually introduce to the listeners today what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, and look, mate, this is a bit of a last-minute thing because look, we all know about the Wieambilla shooting in Queensland between Tara and Chinchilla that occurred December 2022, and I remember it. I remember just obviously not knowing a lot of detail at the time, but I went bloody hell there. But for the grace of God, goes me and everyone I know. Like it would have been such a normal thing. So we're recording this now, and I mean the first day of the inquest was yesterday. So. As a part of that first day, they've released body-worn footage. And I watched it last night late after putting kids to bed, and it just bloody really sent home how the job can turn deadly instantly. And it's a bit of a last-minute thing. We were kind of thinking about talking about other things, but I just can't get that out of my head. And I thought, why not talk about that today? So, I mean, that body-worn footage, that is to me such a normal job. I mean, you can tell. So for those who haven't seen the footage, it's available online now, and it's extremely confronting viewing. So the four young constables have just climbed over a fence to carry out what was a missing person inquiry, and yeah, the person did have an arrest warrant, but that's extremely common. And then the video cuts, which is a good thing. You don't want this graphic. These are real humans; they're not bloody actors in a movie. The screen cuts and it goes from what was a very casual conversation approaching a house, not even near it yet, so you're just working out what you're going to do, but it's relaxed, to just absolute horror and chaos. And what went from basically a routine police inquiry straight into a scene out of Afghanistan. So I think what affected me watching that was the number of times I could just relate so much to those. And I was going to call them kids. I mean, they're a lot younger than me, but they're not kids. They're young adults who are just young police officers doing their job. In the NT, we would do heaps of jobs like that, walking up long driveways towards houses where you have no idea really what you're walking into, but there's no immediate concern. You're sort of just making a routine inquiry. And I did it thousands of times. You would have done it thousands. Every police officer in the country does it thousands of times. And no shots ring out. You just go about your inquiry and go from there. A few things to touch on from that particular incident. From what I could see, the two police killed were Constable Matt Arnold and Constable Rachel McCrow. They were based at Tara Police Station. So they've climbed over at the same time as Randall Kirk and Breeley Roth Ruff I think it is, from Chinchilla Station. And as they've approached, it looks like Matt Arnold has been shot and basically almost, if not killed instantly, killed very quickly. Now, it appears that at almost the exact same time, Rachel McCrow's had received a gunshot wound as well, but hasn't been killed immediately. And I just want to go, it's not nice. This is terrible stuff. So it looks to me like straight away there's been two shots fired and the other two constables have run for their life, basically, which is the only option. You can stand there, you walk over, what happened to you? And then you're just the third victim. So, I mean, they've done just an instinct, would have reacted and they've run. I think where the horror really kicks in is it appears that Gareth Train, who's one of the offenders, one of the three offenders, walked over and just executed Rachel McCrow on the ground. It's the terror level is just absolutely off the charts. And then once the two police officers have been killed initially, the other two running in the bush, and the Constable Randall Kirk, his body worn was well, it's been released to the public. I mean, I praise him for how calm he was. He was speaking to a sergeant on the mobile phone because there was an issue with the radio comms, and he was very calm. But obviously, he's obviously filled with adrenaline and in a lot of shock, I think. And as a result, he's been extremely calm. And then he's made a run for it. You can hear the bullets cracking around him. Jumped a fence, got into a car, had the ability to start the vehicle and drive off without stalling it straight away. Like he hasn't panicked. He didn't look panicked to me. It looked like a scramble to get out of a situation where you need to move quickly. And then he's driven away. Oh, sorry, he's been wounded. When he's in the vehicle, you can see that at one point he reacts to what was apparently a gunshot wound. And then he's continued driving and communicating over the mobile phone with the sergeant the whole time. So the other horror story then comes in that Constable Brealey, Ruff, I think her name is, she's now in the bushes, hiding, being hunted by these two absolute scum. And not only are they shooting at her, but they're lighting fires to burn her out of the grass. Like, it's just, I just can't imagine that level of fear. I've never felt anything like that in my life. I've felt fear, obviously, but not like that. So that's the incident itself. So everyone's going to be able to relate to being very scared in a situation like that because you can see the video footage and you can go, bloody hell, imagine being there. And these are very ordinary people just doing their job. From a policing point of view, I also listen to that, and I think at that time, my job would not have been a constable on the ground. I would have been a shift supervisor or a sergeant. So it's very likely if I was in a situation like that, I would have been the one receiving that phone call and giving those instructions to a young constable on how to survive. So I look at it from that point of view, and I go, can you imagine the feeling of helplessness and the scramble to get resources there? But then not just that, the need to restrain yourself a bit because you've got to go, there's no point just running in and next minute there's 5 cops dead. We need to respond to this. So you've got to fight that urge to just run in and save your mates, but you've then also got to create a response. This is all massively complicated by the fact that you're out in the bush. You're in the middle of nowhere. Comms are an issue. Your backup is an issue. That particular day, my brother was driving. My youngest brother was living in Darwin. He was driving to Toowoomba, and he hadn't heard the news, and he just said, "Oh, I don't know, something massive happening in Dalby. There's all these police cars screaming west, and they were flying." And it turns out that was it. My brother was going on leave for Christmas in the army, and he was heading into Toowoomba, and he passed all these police cars just screaming the other way at about 6 o'clock at night. So I think the general public is obviously going to be horrified by what occurred there. But the police in us, I can look at the whole response and go, can you imagine responding to two of they're not just colleagues, they're friends. Like you're working in small stations together. These people, you know them well, you know them off duty, you probably live in close proximity with them. To be able to go, righto, these two people are dead, we need to respond in there and we need to stop the dying first. So we need to go and save one of our other mates who's now, terrified, hiding in the bush. We need to get the other fella to treatment because he's been shot. And then we need to resolve this issue. We've still got 3 armed people. And I would think you wouldn't even know at this stage. One thing I've already noticed in a few of the comments, and look, I don't really pay a lot of attention to negative comments from people who don't really know what they're talking about, but I looked at why were they sent to such a high-risk thing? And my argument would be, from a police point of view, this is as routine as it gets. A missing person inquiry happens to be in a remote area. We can look back, with 20/20 hindsight and go, well, they were sitting in armed, but you don't know any of this at the time. So it's one of those things where it's just bloody terrible. Have you got me there, mate?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, mate. Sorry about that. But Look, I was sitting there thinking, and like when this first happened, and you touched on a few. It was routine. You probably most police officers, especially ones working out in the bush or those rural areas, would have been to jobs like this where it's a welfare check. I can think of heaps of them just off the top of my head. And when I heard this story, that's what my mind went to. How quick and easy would it have been that to happen to us or one of, especially in the NT, because there's so many remote locations. And it kind of brought home how lucky, I suppose, in a sense, we were, not that that happened to us. It's just an unfortunate series of events. And and I like, well, I don't like the fact that the problem with the inquest, and like, they need to be done, but like I've said this many times, we're looking in hindsight.
Yeah.
So we've got to, you've got to think there's only seconds to think about what to do next. And it's easy to look in and go, well, why didn't they do this? Because, mate, like I said, you've got seconds to think about it. It's not, what we know now is nothing compared to what those four officers knew when they went there, and their sergeant, so to speak, or their sergeants or higher, hierarchy. It's just it's one of those things. And one thing police, are trained to do or learn to do, I think, is react very quickly when shit hits the fan, so to speak. But mate, I just like, there's one thing I know when we first started talking about this, and I you touched on it a little bit there, and it's about the emotion. And you said, like, they're mates. You're going to someone that you could have had breakfast with. And I remember when you were telling the story, how we would put this across to people when we did finally talk about it. It's humanizing those four officers, because those four officers are all people. They're people, everyday people, like, people going to get their coffee in the morning, people going to work in the city. They're just normal people. And
Yeah.
you've got to understand that, it gets very emotional for police. So do you want to just go a bit deeper into that?
Yeah, and I really, I really want to normalise. I think there was one of our friends from the NT, one of the girls, put a comment on, and when it first happened, and she was saying how it was just the worst thing to her about it was, you would have just been driving along, you would have been deciding what music to play on the iPod on the way there, like, you would have read the job, you know what you're doing, but when you're driving to a simple job, you've got to remember this is your job. You do this every single day. It's not like you're kitting up to go to war. These are routine jobs. You naturally approach things with caution, and and you have your wits about you, and you're tactically aware of what you're doing, but you're still just driving along. You know, I thought of things like conversations in the car, like, you're coming up from Tara. Chinchilla's a bigger town with more facilities. You go, look, afterwards, why don't we go up to Chinchilla and update the job up in Chinchilla, and we'll go and have a coffee at that really good bakery in town, or something similar, So to me, that's where the ordinariness of it happens. Like, they're getting out of the car, they're introducing themselves to each other. Like, the two, obviously, the two from Tara are meeting up with the two from Chinchilla, and they didn't know the Breeley, the junior copper. So they were introducing themselves, and, oh, how are you finding it, and all this sort of thing. And the conversation was just so normal. There was obviously nothing to alert them to a dangerous situation. They would have had the information of the job. They would have read that, and it would have been a matter of, oh, okay, guys, hey, we're doing an evening shift tonight, but before the sun goes down, I might just get you to duck up to Wieambilla. We've just got a missing person. We've got a lead from New South Wales that he may have links to this property. Yeah, nothing really. It's a group of school teachers. There's no real risk. There's no real identifiable risk at this point. But just because you're out in the middle of nowhere, we're going to hook you up with the guys from Chinchilla, and away you go. So to me, that just, yep, no worries, righto. We'll see you later on. And yeah, a bit of a drive, happy days. Grab a coffee or whatever and drive out and head out there. And yeah, I just can't. And like, putting myself back to what my role was at what would have been at that time. I was out of the police by then, but my role at that point would have been sitting at the station probably, or just responding to little things in Tara if anything was going on. And to get a phone call, or Chinchilla, and to get a frantic phone call from one of your members at this extremely routine job, and then having this massive response to coordinate, the level of responsibility that lands on the shoulders of the supervisor, it would just be extreme. For me, it was, I have to manage the response of my constables. So the constables they're gonna want to scream in there with guns blazing and rescue their friends. You've got to go, look, we do need to rescue them, but we can't lose anyone else. It's one of those, like I was saying, we all live together. We all know each other well. We're all in the same social groups. It's a small town. I don't know. The job really hits me because of how ordinary it is. It's not a situation where, the police tactical unit are in a gunfight with known high risk offenders and there's everything in place and someone's been wounded. You're talking about a highly trained, highly experienced operator at that point. These are very genuine police. Like, really, we had been in the police force for 8 weeks. Like, at 8, we've spoken about your level of knowledge and things like that. Well, 8 weeks in the job, you know nothing. You are still scared of everything. You're still learning how to do things like take good notes. You're learning how the systems work. You don't know anything. And when all she would have had was her college level training, her 8 weeks which is no experience. And she's then had to respond to that. So she's just had what I would say is an almost civilian response, but obviously her strength of character is that she did what she needed to do. She communicated, and then she was rescued some hours later by those extremely brave colleagues from those little stations that responded hard and went in. I know it's extremely early days in the inquest, but I think what we're commenting on has nothing to do with the inquest. We're humanising the 4 people who were involved in this incident, 2 of which lost their life. 1 was wounded, and I can guarantee you the 2 that lived, they are going to need a lot of help for a long time. This would be, I often thought, when I was saying the snap spine version of PTSD, I was thinking of really rough. I was thinking, you imagine the level of terror that would go through your brain at that point. And to me, that's that's the worst kind of PTSD. That incident would just play over and over and over. She hasn't got the time in the job to be able to relate it back to other people and understand things and be able to sort of, have that camaraderie with everybody to support. I'm sure she's getting support and all the rest of it. I'm sure that's there, but I feel for her. I really do. And both of them. That's just all of them. The families, like, things that really hurt your feelings. Things like, Matt Arnold's ute was packed. He was leaving. He was going on leave in the next day or 2. Like, it was, so human. They certainly didn't expect this to occur. So
no, that's exactly right, mate. And that's exactly it. Like, you mentioned something there, the families and all that sort of stuff, and the PTSD, like that, it would be absolutely horrific. And what I just would like people to consider that when you're thinking about this or when you're commenting about this sort of stuff, those 2 cops that survived will be sitting there going, what if we did this? They will be questioning themselves. That also has survivor's guilt, to a certain extent. Why wasn't it me lying there? It's so traumatic for those poor coppers. And look, in a very shit situation, I can definitely take my hat off to them, because I just can't imagine how I would have reacted, being in the same situation. And I think that's, and that's why we called ourselves 2 ordinary cops. We're nothing special. We really don't know how we would have reacted if we had gone in there and gone to that. So,
sorry, but when it first happened, quite a few people said, "Oh, geez, they just sort of walked in and they've just got shot." I said, "What would you have done? You've been in the job a lot longer than that." And I said, "I would have climbed the fence, walked up the driveway, and taken a bullet through the chest." That's what I would have done.
Right. That's exactly. Yep, that is exactly right. Yeah, because people actually mentioned the same thing to me. Yeah, I would have just walked up, like I have probably hundreds of times before, even in those remote locations.
Yeah, the absolute horror. I think I've said at the beginning, but the absolute horror of this job is the fact that how, we talked about 0 to 100 in the use of lethal force, and we've spoken about that a few times, where things go bad real quick. Well, mate, this went from very, very relaxed. We're going to walk up here, and they were already starting to talk about the job. Like, this guy's got an arrest warrant. This fella, very minimal history. So straight away, you're thinking a guy's going to go, "Yeah, I know. He's never fought the police. He's never been an issue. There's nothing in there to flag this guy." So we've walked up to plenty of houses with they've got heaps of criminal history, and we still go, right, I cover back door, cover front door. We got this guy, got runners out. Just beware of weapons and this sort of thing. We're going to let him know we're here. and make an assessment of his conduct, sort of thing. But I mean, we've also walked up to plenty of houses where we've done a risk assessment on the people. They were looking at the people that they were dealing with, but the risk assessment showed low risk, and that's, of course it would. It would today. I think I'll just sort of move on a little bit. There was another person there that day who was killed, Mr. Alan Dare, the next door neighbour. Him and another friend of his, I think he's Vic, I can't remember his last name. They walked next door, rode and drive next door just to see what was going on, because they were hearing bangs and they could see fire and all the rest of it. So they've gone next door. But once again, from their point of view, and this is something that everyone can relate to, if you see fire and stuff at your next door neighbour's place, you're not thinking, I'm not going over there because I'm going to get shot. You're going, bloody hell, I'm going to go and help my neighbour. So he's turned up, and he was recording on his phone as well. So there's recording of that right up to the point where he was shot, which wasn't shown. But straight away you can also see, oh, there's a bloke over there. Who's that fella at the car there? What's going on? And you can see that they're talking to each other, trying to establish a plan for who do we find and what help do these guys need. Like, there's obviously a car here on fire. I think he said, it looks like a stolen car. But they're still thinking, it's not going to be a life-threatening situation. There's a bit of a bushfire happening here, and we probably need to help and put it out. So, and then for him just to be shot completely randomly, you never have seen it coming. It just adds to the normality of the whole situation, how it just went from extremely normal and very routine to, what I would consider probably the worst thing that's happened in the Queensland Police for many, many years, many decades, probably.
Oh, definitely.
If not ever.
If I can just add in there too, one thing, we've been watching obviously the inquest going on, and my partner Miriam said to me, she goes, I hope they don't forget about the next door neighbour, because his courage to come over and help, and he paid the ultimate price for being a good citizen, and we need to make sure we don't forget that. Because there's some, yes, the boys and girls that wear the blue uniform, they're upstanding and fantastic people, but there's also some really good people in the community as well that would help out at any instant, just to be a good person. And yeah, so it's I think it's really good you opened that up and spoke about him, because he was just being a good Samaritan, helping out, as and that is, it comes down to human nature of good people. That's what it's all about.
Yeah,
so
I know we spoke about. We spoke about in the Being Resourceful Without Resources episode, talking about remote work. I know we spoke out there about how people in the community just came forward and helped out. With your yacht rescue, you had people come forward and just help out. So, and provide resources. It's the same thing out in the bush. That's what happened. You help your neighbours. You help people out. It's a lot more. It's a lot more close knit than it is in major centres. You sort of do look out for each other. So I can completely understand that. If I saw a heap of smoke pouring out of my next door neighbour's place, I would go and have a look as well. So it's and I know there's no one who wouldn't. There's no one around the place who wouldn't. It's got nothing to do with me personally. It's just that's what you do around those sort of places. One thing I'll comment on, I see that the fellow Vic who was there, I think he gave evidence yesterday, and he has made a comment, and he's also in his comments, in his evidence, I should say, he's stated his support for police. He said, I've got no issue, 100% support the police. He said, but we had no information. And I kind of want to explain that a little bit before it does get explained through the inquest. Mate, nobody had any information. The police had no information. The thing was that they'd walked in there, the 4 police had just walked in, and the situation was unfolding. So, I mean, there was no time for, I'm not sure if anything was sent out. This will all come out in the inquest. We're not really talking about the inquest as much as we're talking about the incident and just the humanisation of it. The 2 things from it for me. The public kind of need to understand that the police are human. The police and the government are human. We don't have a crystal ball that just allows us to go, here's all this information and here you need to do this, 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 and this. It's impossible at times because you're so busy responding to an incident that you just don't have time to pump the information out. And that's if you even have the information. my second point to that is it's very important for police and emergency services and anything responding to these kind of situations that, and it could be for anything, flood, fire, gunfight, anything. You need to, the public information is such an important part of that incident response. In this modern age of information, it is so critical to pump that information out to people. And as soon as you have the information, it really needs to be getting put out through systems. I know in New South Wales there's a system called Hazards Near Me, and it's a phone app that basically I get alerts on my phone if there's a fire on Waterfall Way, and it could be minor with basic information of no issue, just for information, under control by this agency. Well, for something like that, it could be an emergency alert that goes out over the mobile phone systems, which happens in floods and fires and things like that. There is a critical incident in your area, you're advised to stay inside, and I get that. But, I mean, the police have to have the information to release the information. So it's a double-edged sword. I think that will be. I would be surprised if there isn't a finding that comes out of. For one, it will appease his questions. Is that look, they didn't have any information to give. It was too early in the matter. And the second one will be looking at that public information, pumping that information out to keep the rest of the public safe and really kind of isolate that incident. So, yeah, I mean, I know it's extremely early days, and it's never appropriate to comment on something like an outcome, to put our 2 cents worth of an outcome on day 2 of an inquest. That's just not realistic. What we are doing is, I think we're just living up to the name of the podcast, mate. It's 2 ordinary cops, and they were just 4 ordinary cops who climbed over a fence. 2 didn't come home, and 2 are paying the price for it for the rest of their life.
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly right, mate. And I'll just add in there too, because we were, we had a couple of things we wanted to talk about today when we're doing the recording, and I know, like, when we started, you and I were having a chat about what we were going to talk about. And the thing is, the Wieambilla, it hits us at home, and we couldn't really think of anything else. There's a lot of other stuff we could talk about and wanted, but it just consumes our thought process. And one was, like we said before, because it could have been us that did that. But we also see the human side of it, because we've worn that uniform before, and so we're not doing this for notoriety. We were probably doing it partly for our own I suppose mental health issues to a certain extent, because one of the most important things when you're talking about that is to actually talk about it. And so it's just one of those things. It's emotional for us and everybody else that wears that uniform, and I imagine probably to quite a bit of the public as well.
Yeah, mate. It's I think it's because we have this platform. We put our thoughts on this platform, and that's our thoughts on that. But we're not commenting on tactics. But there were no tactics. We're not sort of talking. Well, there were tactics later on, but there certainly weren't tactics in the initial response. Because there were no requirement for tactics. I think that's the whole point. But, mate, I don't know if we have to go on too much more. I think the reason why we spoke about this is, at the time, it affected me. Like, I remember sitting outside after I'd heard the news, and I was scrambling through Facebook to sort of find out what was the story. And I had inside tracks. Like, I had my friends who were getting information basically second and third hand from the members in those areas. And they're going, mate, this is what I'm hearing, and it was way worse than what we were hearing from the media. But that's fine. That's how it is when the police are reporting things back.
Yeah.
It affected me at the time. I was obsessed with finding out what was going on. I was screaming for information at the time to try and see, how they're going to resolve it. And it's waned in memory because it's coming up on nearly, it's just over 18 months ago now. But I think just seeing that footage yesterday really brought it home to me again about how normal these things are.
Yep.
And I think I can relate to it so well. I think that's why it stays on my mind. So I think the reason we spoke about this today was because it was the only thing I could really think about today. It was the only policing related issue in my brain. Normally there's not many. So it was good.
That's sorry, mate. That's probably a bit of a good thing in a way, I suppose. But
that's right.
But no, you're right. You're dead right. there's just one other thing I want to touch on, and one thing I know we did have a bit of inside information, and part of it was that video, and I've always I've been a big believer that sometimes the public they're better off not knowing about some of the I suppose traumas that people go through, and I just have this thing that sometimes the public just doesn't need to know some of this stuff, and I wish they'd try and keep it a bit more contained. Part of what we see is what we saw and why we live with even PTSD today and trauma, but I don't want every person to see that. So I mean they need to understand it, but they to see it and be traumatized for it is I mean that's why I did the job to try and stop that from happening. So that's probably the only point I can really make today.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, the footage is horrific. It really is, and I think I don't know. That's a tricky one. I'm in two minds. I'm not a believer of withholding information from the public, but I'm also not a believer of just pumping it out, like pumping out footage of just horror. Like it should almost be, look, the footage is here. You can, if you're interested in the inquest, this is the inquest, and there's footage involved. I don't know whether it needs to be splashed all over the Channel 9 News. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I know exactly what you're saying, and I think that the problem is, and what it takes me back to a bit of that the Christchurch shooting. How we did it live on air, and that kind of gives him a platform, and people like that don't need a platform. They're just people like that are scum in my view, and they do it because they get a platform, they do something big, and it's I mean those people they're just pathetic, absolutely pathetic human beings. But I won't go into too much more, mate. Otherwise, you really know what I think.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Well, mate, I don't know. What do you think? I'm happy with that. We'll it's something we'll probably comment on again as the inquest goes through. I think it's scheduled for 5 weeks. Maybe at the end when it's all summed up, we might have a look at it through and put in our 2 cents. Like once again, we're only 2 ordinary cops, mate. We're not going to go through and analyse it and comment on the outcome and findings and that sort of thing. I mean, within reason, but we'll certainly just add what we can to it. So.
Yeah, mate. I think exactly, and I think we're just 2 ordinary cops. So all we're going to do is we're going to sit there and just add, I suppose, to some of the stuff that comes out in the inquest. We might play a bit as devil's advocate to try and get people to understand what thoughts were going through those cops' mind, because part of the inquest sometimes they point fingers, and I think it's important not to be so, I suppose. What do you say? Narrow down to point fingers. Sometimes it's just an unfortunate series of events, and so I really just want to push over. There's a human side to this, and everybody making those decisions will be thinking, why didn't I do this, or why didn't we do that? And it's one of those things that it hits every person, I suppose, when you get something like that.
Yeah, definitely, mate. All right, well, that'll wrap it up, eh? 2 ordinary cops.
Yeah, mate. Yep, for sure. We're signing off.
All the best.